Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Folks, in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the Falken's maze. And if you're wondering, Steve, what are you talking about? What's the Falken's maze? Well, if you've never watched the movie War Games, it's older now, but it was essentially a movie that's about a young kid, I guess you could say 16, 17, 18, whatever, and he hacks into the computer systems that control the nuclear assets for the US. And then of course, in the process of doing that, he's actually trying to get in to play some games, but he accidentally or whatever gets into this thing and starts to play the game Thermonuclear War. Not a good game to play, right? Now, if it's a game, you might think, oh, okay, whatever. And he does. But what he doesn't realize is he's tapped into that game, okay? This presentation here is not going to be about that game or that movie, but the first game on the list is Falken's Maze. And because this professor, Falken, is the one who created this whole computer system to be able to distinguish and make decisions, right? Now, fast forward, we have AI now, which is, light years ahead of all of the the story of this sort of technology, right? This is back in the old days, if you will. But really, Falken's Maze is really kind of a symbolism, right? It's the first game. Now, if you think about it, on our learning journey, right, our lives are essentially a learning journey. Falken's Maze, in this instance, is a reference back to the first time, and this is going to be different for each of us, right? The first time that you played a game that ended in a tie. Now, in the movie, they use a good example. It's very simple. It's tic-tac-toe, right? And in tic-tac-toe, you can play tic-tac-toe in such a way that it ends in a tie. I guess they call it a cat's game or whatever. And so it ends in a tie, okay? And once you've kind of locked into that sequence, for the most part, the game becomes kind of boring, right? Now, I bring this up because there was a phase in our life and our learning journey when we played a game. It could have been like tic-tac-toe. It could have been anything, really. And not all games can end in a tie, but some do, right? But the point here, the broader point here is that the game, right? You could look at everything we do from a game perspective, right? Whether that's your work, your education, actual sports and games and so forth, that sort of thing. Even in video games, and I played a few myself. Who really wins in a video game? Is it the red team or the blue team? Thinking back to Halo, red team or blue team. That's a funny set of videos if you ever get a chance. But is it the red team or the blue team, or is it the creators of the game? Well, it's the creators of the game. They win all the time, irrespective of what happens within the game itself, right? The game itself is played for entertainment or to occupy or to keep people busy and kind of distracted and that sort of thing, right? Now, you can pull back and say, there's a lot of relevant associations here, right? Whether we're talking about organizations where we're often working together, hopefully to serve customers, right? Or whether it's in your communities, broader culture, clubs, associations, churches, all of it, right? Countries, right? But that it all applies, right? The game is essentially being sponsored by the few, right, and played by the many. But the whole notion is that there is a winning of these sorts of games. What I'm essentially presenting to you is that it isn't necessarily about winning that game. In essence, playing that game keeps your lights on, food in your fridge, your rent or your house payment being paid, your car, et cetera, insurance, right? Taking care of the kids, all the good things. It helps to pay for that. You playing the game helps to pay the bills. That's very egoic, right? That's kind of taking care of our base needs. But the learning journey in your life has really been the things that have developed you, right? Developed you, heart, mind, body, soul, all of it, right? Intellectually, all of it, okay? So the real winning that you're getting out of your learning journey is really starts, okay, has started, right? I'm not saying, oh, it started today. No, if you're comprehending this far into the video, it started well before today, okay? But consciously think back to when you first realized that a game wasn't worth playing because there was no way to win it, right? Right? So if you think back, tic-tac-toe is just an easy, low-hanging fruit. But think back to something of that nature, or something where your time and effort didn't really amount to much, right? Where you put in time and you didn't get reciprocal, time and or value back, right? You invested X and you only got X back, right? Or maybe less than X, okay, X minus 1, right? Now, this could be relationships too, folks, right? This could be relationships. You invested a lot and you got a little back, right? And you thought, this isn't really aligned, right? So I'm, changing path and direction. Whatever it might have been, whatever clued you into the where the value proposition didn't make sense, right? And now, value proposition isn't just monetary and materialistic, right? It's like, again, heart, mind, body, and soul, right? It's all of you, right? It's all elements and aspects of you, okay? But once you realize that, whether you were young or whether it happened when you were young, but it took a few reinforcements, right? Hey, got the t-shirt, sweatsuit, the whole, the matching outfit. Been down the path. I understand. None of us are immune to this, folks. Once you've figured out the cycles of this and then stepped back from it, then you are and slowed things down and got into a quiet place, then you were able to reflect back and say, okay, what's going on here? What's the situation? Oh, okay, I'm decidedly on the short end of the stick here. Now, some people look at the game, and I'm just referring to it as the game, but this cultural game that's being sponsored for us, okay, and they think, well, it's rigged that I can never win. Well, if you look at it through that lens, it may be true. You may not win in the mindset that you have, but that winning from that perspective is really what? Materialistic based, right? Resource based. Well, I need to have resources piled up to the moon so that I can feel like I accomplished something. Really? Because there's so many things that happen within your life that don't have a material value, okay? They have a value to your heart, right? And to your intellect, right? Might be your health, right? That's a good one, right? That's one we definitely need to preserve and fight for, right? But what happens is you see folks go, oh, well, I need to escape the matrix. Oh, the matrix. And then, they might move off grid. And hey, if that's what they want to do, then fine, go do that. That's everybody has to live their own sovereign life, right? Has to be free to make their choice, right? And I'm not trying to convince you, oh, well, you just be happy in the matrix if you want to look at it from that perspective, right? I'm not saying be happy in the matrix. What I'm saying to you is that there's a lot to be learned about ourselves while we're, on that tennis court of life, hitting the ball back and forth, right? The thing we have to be careful about is that when that game, right, that's sponsored starts to then be destructive to the players, right? So now the game went from being, well, we got to work hard because we got to produce value because we got to which is exhausting, no doubt about it. But, doing that, when that script flips to where sponsors of the game now have poisoned your drink or your food at this particular event, right? That's been sponsored, poison that, or there's the stakes of the game now have gone to loss of life for folks, right? When those stakes start to ante up into that regard, now we're going, wait a second, you were already benefiting from the sponsorship of this game, right? This presentation of life, culture, we'll say. You were already manipulating it to your own best outcome. Now, part of that manipulation also has to include the well-being of the players and fans. That's where you kind of have to draw the line, right? You do have to draw that line, and for each of us, we have to draw it for ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we aren't still in it. We are always going to be in it. It is our journey, while our feet are on this planet to what? To see winning now as the learning journey. The learning journey. So here's what happens. The sponsors now have set up the game to where it's now detrimental. But now they've also tried to insert in here and divide the fans and divide, the players to such an extent that now it's gone beyond just being competitive, and now it's derisive and divisive, right? And harmful, to where certain groups want to hurt other certain groups, certain individuals, and so on and so forth, right? And we don't want that. So what happens is that now the sponsors of this game, right, this presentation, all right, the sponsors now are actively saying, well, hey, we can get more value out of this if we get everybody to, essentially, it's gone from a few tennis players in the middle, right, to everybody kind of looking at each other as a potential threat. And I'm kind of over exaggerating, but you get the idea, right? Is that to see people, different color, different this, different that, and then all the isms come into play, right? So still, when you step back from it, you have to look at this on all, even playing ground, essentially, and say, if I buy this particular premise, right? If I buy that premise, it's like the tic-tac-toe game. There is no winning. There's no winning. Divisiveness and all these things, there is no winning involved. So when we first realized that we could play a game or do an activity or it could have been relationships, it could have been professional, personal relationships, all of it, and there wasn't equal value exchanged, right? Heart, mind, body, and soul. At that point, and then whatever reinforced this until some of us started to go, wait a second. It's the buy-in, folks. It's the buy-in. It's one thing to have to live in the world to survive and all that. Fine. But then draw a healthy line of dissociative attachment to it and understand that there are those who are manipulating the game to serve the few, okay? Now, does it mean that the game, right, it's like a system. The system isn't necessarily evil, okay? A system is just a system, but then it's the manipulation of the system, right? This is what's harmful. So in our learning journey, it is really to learn to start waking up. And when we start waking up, we start to realize that this is the street drama, right? All of the drama and all of the fluff and all the junk that flies over social media and all the things that are distractive, right? Definitely distractive, but also divisive, right? This is my filter. If somebody's trying to pit me against somebody else without my permission, and they're just trying to assume me into that energy, no, I don't go there. I may not jump up and down, scream and holler, but no, consciously, no, see ya, bye, right? And this, for all the talk about cults out there, look, folks, try to look around in a circle, and you will find a group that is essentially trying to make the cult out of their own out of their own group, right? So be wary. That's all. Be wary and be smart, right? You can have fun playing the game of life, but when you start to divide people and start to form up against other people, right, to the detriment of the fans and the players within this sponsored event, the game has the rules of the game are literally not being followed and are being forgotten. Okay, so when the rules aren't being followed and they're not being forgotten, i.e., rights and so on and so forth, right? Then that's when you have to say, not playing your games, right? So be careful there. But our learning journey, part of that learning journey too, is to understand that we don't need to burn the matrix to the ground. Okay, it's not required for us to go, oh, well, the system's just evil and bad, and we got to destroy it. No, folks, this is where we, in our learning journey, we go, whoa, blow the whistle, right? Not a very good whistle. blow the whistle, and we need to go, whoa. We need to build back the field, build back, build the infrastructure and the architecture of culture. I mean, that's really where we are, folks. We have entered Falken's maze at some point. We have ventured through, right? And at a certain point realized that, yes, it's a challenge to get through this maze and so on and so forth, but it's the best way not to get sucked down the wrong path in the maze is to elevate yourself out of it. That isn't to say we need to destroy the maze. Why is this? Because some others do need to learn the lesson, right? They do need to walk their journey. Some people, listen, folks, we're all coming to this awareness, right? On this learning journey, we are all coming to our awareness at different times in our life. Some people come to certain awareness when they're very young. Some as they get a little bit older. Some as early adulthood. Some a little bit later. Some, well into midlife. Some later life, right? And sometimes there's a shock related if your entire existence in life is hung on materialism, right? What do I have? What do I control? And then that spills over into who am I controlling? And can I get them to, I'm now exerting, part of the game has now become, exerting your will over others, right? Disregarding the sovereignty of others to live their life and to pursue their learning journey. That's obviously not good, right? And so there isn't this, you could call it an awakening or realization, right? Hasn't come to bear yet. But when it does, it's one thing for us to sit there and go, oh, well, this, it's not good. And eventually they should, have an awareness and so forth. And it may frustrate you, especially if you're somebody who's been aware of some of these things for quite some time. But we have to have some empathy, because when these folks hit the wall and they realize, oh, there is no way to win this game. I can't take any of these things with me. Oh, late in life, I've got, maybe I'm a 500 millionaire, I'm 500 million in the bank, but I have, but my kids, are estranged and all my relationships fell off into the weeds, right? Now, it isn't to say a life is perfect. We can have stuff like this occur. I don't know, the 500 million, maybe not just happening to everybody at once, right? but the idea here is that if I was obsessed about building up material resources and wealth, but I wasn't balanced in my life, right? I didn't have a balance toward my purpose, right? Which, as I stated in the book, if you don't have a purpose, here's one that's low-hanging fruit. You're here to protect love, right? And part of that Falken's maze, to traverse that Falken's maze, the first game, right? This is the first game. If you have not come to some of these realizations to such an extent that you are helping others through the maze, right? You may say, well, but, is the point to go through the maze or not go through the maze? That's a question you're going to have to answer for yourself as you traverse the maze, okay? because I would be doing a disservice if I said, oh, well, once you get to the other side, you'll have great life. No, I can't predict that. I can't predict that. You may not get through the maze, right? I may not get through the maze. We may not get through the maze as a culture, but we can get much further if we're helping each other out, if we're not divisive. And this isn't Survivor, right? The show Survivor. This isn't Survivor, where we just keep eliminating people off the island. But it feels a little bit like that, doesn't it? It feels like others are pitting you against others and others against you. It feels a little like that, right? Even in business and organizations, go down to a used car lot and see how quickly, they're just happy to slice into and not work with you and try to finagle you sideways. It's not going to work out for you. You're on the losing end. Because why? Because, I need to buy a hammer. When all of a sudden you walk in the store and somebody throws a sign up and said all hammers are 500% more expensive now. Well, there's nothing you could ever do about that, right? There's not a thing you could do about it, but you need a hammer to build something with, right? It's a means to an end. But others are taking the means to an end, right? And trying to take advantage of people. And this is part of it. It's some of these unethical business practices. Obviously, hammers aren't an issue, but it might be energy, right? It might be vehicles. It might be the things we need to get our work done, right? It might be a whole host of things. But look what's occurring. It's who can scalp consumers, right? Consumer scalping and fleecing is a problem. But who's calling it out? No one's calling it out. And that silence across the board in many categories that silence should be screaming at you right now. It should be screaming at you to go, oh, one way you can, vote in the consumer world is to vote with where you buy. If you're buying with those who are trying to take advantage, then that's problematic. You're essentially supporting and propping them up. If you're buying in arenas where they're healthy, right? They're healthy organizations that are doing good in the world, then that's probably a good thing, right? You're not going to have a perfect lens to that, right? We kind of, it's hit or miss a lot of times. Hopefully we're hitting more than we're missing, right? But for the most part, larger industries they don't really care about you. Okay, they never really have. They care about your money, right? And the only way that they could ever care about you is to have ethical practices top to bottom and be willing and open to evaluate and to assess that. If they aren't willing to evaluate and to assess that and be transparent, right, then is that where you spend your money? No, you probably would not. You would not, especially if they're, if it's food, if they're poisoning you, right? If this is going on, you're not going to spend your money there, and you're probably going to be telling all your friends and family not to purchase this and go there and all this, right? Well, what's different between that and every other element of our lives, right? What's the difference between, cults that are trying to convert people, right? What's different between, local communities that have, local governments that are trying to take advantage of the local populace that are kind of, they're essentially trapped there because the economics are such that people just can't maybe move out of there, right? They're essentially trapped. Okay, so you have these situations, folks, and we have to be cognizant of this because our learning journey to develop ourselves and to have an awakening and a realization. Again, I come back to it's not about burning it to the ground; it's about building it. Okay. It's about building it in a healthy way. Yes, we want to come back to the car. If you're refurbishing a car, you got to get the rust off, right? You get the corrosion and the rust off. This is where we're at, folks. We're driving around a car that's got a lot of rust on it, and we're going, this isn't good, right? We need to get the rust off this thing. We're not in we're going to just, drive, this thing is pristine now. We're in if we don't, tackle this, it's just going to fall apart on us, right? And so we're in the corrosion control mode here. Falken's maze is the beginning of you realizing and awakening, to a certain level, to the fact that there is too much corrosion within culture, right? And hear me correctly, the corrosion is how it's working, not people, okay? Value everyone. Everyone brings value to this, even the people who are clueless, okay, about what's going on, even those who don't realize that they're in a game that's been sponsored and hosted by somebody else for the broader amusement, okay? Have empathy, right? Because once they are awakened, there are going to be some, they're going to be, they're going to be throwing a fit, right? And it's okay to be upset. We have to feel and process that. But at the same time, we then have to shift into being constructive. It's no different within culture as it is within our own organizations. If we do this, you're going to find that we can start to kind of turn things around. But we have to own it first, folks. The first step in solving a problem is understanding that you have a problem, okay? And that is just as true for an individual as it is for a small group, as it is for a community, as it is for a country, as it is for anyone, right? So if you're not able to own that, then you're constantly going to be in these negative cycles. And that's what's happening now is that culture is essentially adrift. And pulling this back on track means that we need more people rowing the boat, okay? And part of rowing boat really is it's about sanding down and refurbishing the car, okay? So so let's get some more folks aware of Falken's maze, okay? Hopefully your learning journey is going well. Hopefully you have learned situations where there wasn't a benefit, right? Hopefully you aren't one of those who are taking advantage unfairly of others. There are plenty of those folks out there. You could say they're perpetrators, but they really just bought into the notion that somehow they get to take all of their toys with them, and they don't. It just don't. It just doesn't work like that. Remember to hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When we do this, not only have to transform culture, but we're transforming our own life. But don't forget, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not first willing to transform on the inside. This is so important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.